and welcome back to another episode of 7 Minutes in Heaven, a podcast devotional for educators. I am your host, Pratiá Jordan, blogger-in-chief of Prayer and Pedagogy.com, where our mission is to edify, equip, and encourage educators everywhere. This is episode 16, Against All Hope. Let's get into it. Today's word comes from Romans chapter 4, verses 18 through 19. And the NIV version reads, "Against all hope, Abraham, in hope, believed, and so he became the father of many nations. Just as it had been said to him, so shall your offspring be. Without weakening in his faith, he faced the fact that his body was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, and that Sarah's womb was also dead." So today's word coming from Romans is actually Paul reminding and relaying the story of Abraham and Sarah to New Testament believers. And he is using this story as an exemplar of how God can do impossible things and how God's promises are always delivered upon. I really think that Paul's message to these New Testament believers is one that really resonates with me right now as an educator and a believer, because when I look out in the field of education, I see a lot of challenges. I see a lot of problems. I see a lot of difficulties and a lot of hard situations that we're dealing with. And I think when I look at Paul using this story of Abraham and Sarah, it really inspires me in two different ways. Number one, it's okay to face the facts. In verse 19, we see where Paul, speaking of Abraham, says he faced the fact that his body was as good as dead and that Sarah's womb was also dead. Here, Abraham has been given a promise that he will be the father of many nations, that his offspring will be numerous and numberless. And yet the reality that Abraham lives in is that he is 100 years old and his wife has been barren. And what I love about this is that we get this simple idea that it's okay to call a thing, that we can say the truth about challenging situations, about difficult times, about hardships that we are facing. And that doesn't make us any less of a Christian. It doesn't make us any less of a believer. It doesn't mean that we are any less hopeful or dependent on God to fulfill his promises. And maybe it's just me, but I feel like I've heard a lot of messaging when it comes to sermons and things that, we need to always say what we want things to be, what we hope for things to be, that we need to speak things that be not as though they were. And I've always heard that in a way that means that we can't ever say what the doctor said, that we can't ever label something that it has been labeled by others. And I really found it encouraging here that Abraham is saying, hey, look, I'm 100 years old. My body is as good as dead. Sarah's womb, she's been barren this whole time. It's also as good as dead. These are the facts. He's not walking around like, woo, 100 is the new 50. It's not putting a face on things that is not realistic or that is not true. When I look out on the landscape of education and when I'm finding myself facing difficult challenges and hard situations, that it's comforting to know that I can face the facts of something, that I can call something out as it is. I don't have to always say that everything's blessed and highly favored and God is working everything out and, that I'm joyful and positive about everything. For me, it was encouraging to see that Abraham was able to be honest, that he was able to face the reality and to call it for what it was. And this is a man that we know had great faith, that we know was a man of God, that we know believed in him. And so to see somebody who is listed in the hall of faith, who is called the father of faith, the father of many nations, it is comforting to know that he lived in reality. I think that sometimes as believers who are educators, we can get caught up in a web of toxic positivity where we have to always be thinking of something positive and calling something positive and trying to find the positive in something, and we tend to gloss over or ignore hard truths. We don't want to address those, or we don't want to speak those things out. And I just find comfort in the fact that we can face the facts, that we can be honest in our conversations with other believers, in our conversations with God, in our conversations with ourselves, and really be truthful about the challenging situations that we're in. And I think that when we face the facts and when we are honest about the hard times, it gives us the ability to choose faith over facts. In verse 18 and verse 19, we see where it addresses the faith that Abraham had in the face of the facts. 18 says, against all hope, Abraham in hope believed. And verse 19 says, without weakening in his faith, he faced the facts. For me, I begin to see this as two things that go hand in hand. When I face the facts, when I am acknowledging and addressing the challenges and the hardships and the negative things that are taking place in the world around me, in my classroom, in my life, that is what gives me the opportunity to flex my faith. It gives me the chance to choose to believe God's promises in spite of the facts. It is because I am facing the facts that I get to believe. What is there to believe in if things are always great? What am I believing God for if everything is perfect? What do I have faith for if everything is already worked out? It is when I face the facts that this job is challenging, that these kids are challenging, that my situation is hard, that I'm in a bad position, or I'm not in the place that I want to be. It's when I'm able to say, Lord God, this situation is negative. I don't see anything good happening here, but I am choosing faith over facts. And so because you promised me this, because your word says that, against all hope, I am going to hope and believe. And for me, I think that's most powerful, because when we try to gloss over the facts, ignore the facts, we are discounting what it will take for God to make this thing happen, for him to fulfill his promise. When Abraham is facing the fact that his body is dead and that Sarah's womb is barren, that's him declaring, God, you are about to blow my mind, because I am facing the facts that these things are challenging, that this time is difficult, and I still believe that you are going to make me a father of many nations, that my lineage will be numerous. Don't know how you're going to do it, because the truth is my body is as good as dead, and so is my wife's. But against all hope, Abraham in hope believed. And I think the important part is that we can face facts as long as we do not weaken in our faith. We can face the facts as long as we also choose faith over facts. Against all hope, in hope, we must still believe. And I hope that you find this to be an encouraging thing, that as you look over the landscape of your situation, you can face facts and then choose faith over facts, because God will always deliver on his promises. And that is a fact. This is your 7-minute challenge for the week. Make a list of hard realities that you need to face, and then turn that list into a prayer request list. Pray over each one of those challenging facts by name and continue to hope against all hope. Make sure you choose faith over facts. Thank you for joining me at the intersection of prayer and pedagogy. See you next time.